that we do is I will share my screen and I'll do the Xfinity um, lineup review here just for my single because I actually did cash in the 180 with Custer, so I wanted to see how on earth that was possible. Okay, so this
Yeah,
was
I think I had one out of my 12 cash with Custer in the 10, and I was just they were all right on the bubble, just right under it.
yeah. So I'll show you what I did. Let's share entire screen. And with Perkins too. The I guess the I guess the lesson to be learned is in this thing there were only 154 entries, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Oh, it is a barely cash. That's a
I don't know how this even worked. I guess Sammy Smith winning. I
uh,
guess he
yeah,
outscored the
similar.
rest between him and Klingerman. They outscored the rest of my lineup. I
Oh,
mean,
that I think that's the. Let me look at mine really fast because I don't know if I had Perkins in it, but the Bush, Custer, Smith, and Kligerman was the one that I cashed with. Pretty sure I had a different.
yeah.
Uh,
So this was it's
but yeah,
very. I was actually very surprised with that it cashed when it gets down to it. But it's like they say, well, we're not gonna uncash the check, that's for sure. So we'll we'll take that down. Um, Wait, looks like one of my streams is having connection issues. I shouldn't think so. All right, whatever. I'll just let that sort itself out. All right, so today, for those of you just hopping in now, and then again, if you hop in late, you can always rewind. I usually spend just the first like 2 or 3 minutes, just kind of going over my Xfinity thing from yesterday, which we just did, just to kind of give people a chance to kind of show up here. And I was on the same idea as Brandon talked about in his videos, basically locking in Custer and Bush. Um, and I'm just a sucker for these plays. We're gonna get to one today that just start up close, supposed to have the fastest car, and just freaking just sprint out and say,
Mhm.
"Everybody, come catch me," and I'll lead 150 to 200 laps and just be done with him. And I didn't get a chance to watch the race, but after I watched the first like 15, 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh, this is easy. Custer's
yeah. You're like, okay, cool. Custer's out to a 3-second lead. There's nobody in
yeah.
the field even going to touch this man.
And you know what happens is that when you follow the announcers like within like 45 seconds of the race start, they already started to look at who's fourth, fifth, seventh, ninth.
Uh,
So let's go to the first major issue: is who's 12th and 11th. I'm like, because Custer's long gone already.
yeah,
They're looking for something else to cover aside from the fact that obviously Custer's going to run away and hide. The next thing you know, I see not next thing I know, maybe a half hour later, I see that he's like 14th. I'm like, okay, he's probably in the pit or something like that. There's probably someone, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So sometimes I guess they just don't run as best. I
yeah.
suppose that's the best I can describe it. I imagine.
It,
All right, so there are a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about fundamentally as well today. In addition to doing the build, so I kind of buried the lead here when I was talking about Custer. Is that Kyle Larson in a I don't want to say in a similar way, but I guess in a similar way. He's the one of the he's the highest priced guy, and he has the pole, and he's going to be 100% owned, and he rates to blast everybody, and
Mhm.
that's one thing that you have to deal with. So for those of you here first time, what you're looking at here is kind of my sheets, which are basically a weighted combination of some of the higher respected projections in the industry, weighted basically by accuracy. I mean, I back test some of these projections, and Womb Brandon is one of them for accuracy over as long as back as I can do it. And then I give some projections a little more of a weight than others for my own reasons, right? And kind of an average ownership projection, so people just get a look at kind of what this is. And then what I use this file is I will upload this to SaberSim when I run MME builds. But I also find that from a just to visualize it like this, for the purposes of doing single entry, it kind of helps me. So what this is not going to be, for those of you for the first time, we're not going to go like driver by driver, breakdown by breakdown, breakdown. Like at this point, you should have honestly like either watched one of Brandon's videos by now or something like that, where you should have an idea of who the good plays are. We're going to spend a little bit more time, hopefully, on actual lineup construction. But the one thing I wanted to ask you fundamentally, okay, and we are going to have to talk about a driver when we talk about this. One thing I mentioned to you when we first started talking about NASCAR, what was it, a year or two ago, whatever, was NASCAR is very, I want to say course fit, but there's so much emphasis put on track history in analyzing how a car is going to do. I want you to talk about a little of that, because it's not just you, it's like everybody, all the experts, that's what happens. You say, okay, XYZ driver at this track has done so well. XYZ, tell me why that would be. You know what I mean? Because we're making a pretty big assumption to say something like, you know, a driver does so well at this particular track, and as a result, his projection is going to be bumped because of that. Now, again, we're talking about a very, I don't want to say small, but we're talking about a handful sample size when you're talking about access to these tracks, maybe 5, 10 races or whatever. Tell me what it is about a track that would make like a Harvick or somebody, you know what I mean, like that much better on this track than something else.
I think it's more so on the driver versus the teams. Like you'll see it correlate even when the drivers swap different teams. I just think it's more so based on what that driver is comfortable with. I think, you know, very similar in a vein of like golf. Like some people are better on certain types of grasses than others. You know, like today's a good example. Like some people are better players in the wind. So you're going to see like some guys at the top of the leaderboard be able to stay up there today with all the wind heading over. Like some guys just feel better on certain types of courses, whether it can be courses, it could be types of asphalt, concrete, you know, short tracks typically lean to just a certain driver. Very similar to, you know, if you look at like when you drive around daily, you know, I would assume that you brake differently than most people around you, whether it's good or bad. The way that you like come to a rolling stop at a stop sign or at a red light or something is different than other people. Some people just slam the brake. Some people gently get on the brake just to come to a red light. Well, the same thing can apply to a racetrack, and these types of tracks lean to those little nuances of how soft or how aggressive you brake, how soft or how aggressive you get on the gas. Same thing with steering. And it literally just falls into how certain drivers like prefer to drive. And it leans to some people being good at short tracks, some people being good at intermediate tracks. But that's the main thing when I look at track history, specifically for Phoenix. It's not necessarily what teams these drivers are with, but it's just how they do in general, regardless of the team that they're with. Like, you know, Eric Almirola, for an example, you can go all the way back to where he was with, you know, Richard Petty in a slow 43 car, basically being a consistent, you know, top 20 performer, you know, and then he gets in slightly better equipment and he hasn't really finished outside the top 12 outside of 2 races since 2017. Same thing with, you know, people like Kyle Busch. I know that's more, you know, Joe Gibbs, but even in every single series he races in the trucks, Xfinity Cup Series, here he's a consistent top 5 driver. Harvick, in every single race that he's started for Stewart-Haas, for Hendrick, Harvick has always been consistent here. And so it literally just falls into what drivers are comfortable with. And this is one of those tracks that lean into some drivers' strengths and leans into some drivers' weaknesses more than others.
So this is what I'm going to do. So first I'm kind of looking at this, and then we're going to build with SaberSim, and then we'll analyze a little bit and see what types of lineups people are going to get to and what types of lineups we should get to. So the reason I mentioned the Harvick only because, I mean, like I'm looking at the top owned guys being Larson, Harvick, and actually the guy we just mentioned, Alec Almirola. I thought he was going to be such a sneaky idea by me, you know, Almirola. But like he's so these are like the 3 kind of top guys. So I guess what the idea is that also I imagine, and we'll look at it when we build. I imagine Harvick is starting like kind of in the middle, like in the 15, something like that. So you have him starting in like the 15, and then you have, say, Almirola, he's in the back somewhere, like 30, and then you have Larson kind of near the front. So you'd think that this would be a very logical type of thing to do, right? To pick Larson in the front, Harvick in the middle, and Almirola coming from the back. So it would seem to be that's what people would do. So let me pull up a Saber Sim, and we'll just build. So what I do, just to show you the process. Okay. So what we do is, if you're actually a premium member, it will upload. You can upload my projections straight to Saber Sim, or you can use Saber Sim's projections, or you can upload your own. And that's what I'm doing right now. This is my own file. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll build and sim diversity, and not to turn this into a full lesson on how to use Saber Sim, but sim diversity just means how much variance you want to put into it. And usually for NASCAR, 8 is usually pretty good. They sometimes default to 10, but if you have a little bit more faith in your projections, you can make it a little bit lower. So let's keep it that way, and we'll use 50 lineups, and we'll just kind of see what we come up with. Now, I imagine it'll be 100% Larson, but we shall see.
So when I did my early ones, I got nearly no Eric Almirola. I was shocked yesterday.
Okay.
Based on my projections, and I don't know if that's how I was building or just what I was doing, but I wasn't getting to Eric Almirola. I had to manually get him into lineups.
Well, it's also possible that you just projected him lower than other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's possible also. As a matter of fact, let me just see if I can / want to share that. Let me just see. They're ready. So Alec Almirola, you were actually not outside the realm of everybody else. You know what I mean? You are right. Literally, as a matter of fact, it's really funny. You had him if you wouldn't mind. You had him projected at 36. And the net I ended up with after everything was 37.75. So it's really right.
And when you bring stuff up, a lot of people in my Discord have outside of me asking them to do, they've done a lot of back testing on my stuff, and it makes me so happy when I hear that.
Yeah.
that I'm right there with.
Yeah. Okay, so when you just run a straight, I don't give a crap betting. I just want to I'm doing a little bit of variance, but we're just gonna run lineups. You're getting 100% Larson, 88%. And now I could have told you this was happening because I ran this before. The guy you're getting, which is a little bit, I don't want to say interesting, but I just wasn't expecting it, is a full 60% Christopher Bell. And in addition to that, you're getting 40% Hamlin. Now, again, for me, we talk about this, is that when you have guys competing, to use Pierce's thing, for the same bucket of points, right? When you guys competing for those laps led and those fastest laps or whatever, you run into some correlation problems when you play too many of them, because every lap that Kyle Larson leads, Denley Hamlin's not leading. Every lap that Carl Larson leads, Christopher Bell, for example, is not leading. So you got to be, it's important to play multiple dominators, whatever it is. You got to be careful about putting yourself in too big of a pickle with respect to that. So I
want to add to that really fast. One thing that I've noticed over the last few years in NASCAR, more than what it used to be in 2020, 2019 and stuff, is that the leader is not necessarily getting the fastest laps anymore. So even in a sense of if the leader is getting the laps led, I've typically found that Hamlin, Bell, just because we were talking about him here, they are very much in line to get fast laps, even if they aren't leading the race. And just because those are worth so much more than the 0.25 for the laps led, I've lent to being way more comfortable starting and playing more people starting in the top 5 in a similar line, because if you're going to be a top 5 car, even if you aren't leading, you're more than likely the leader is not getting the fast lap anymore.
That's so interesting. So why would that be? Because they're trying to kind of once they have the lead, they're trying to conserve energy or something like that?
I am not. I I can't really explain that in a sense of like what's causing that to happen. I just know that it has happened.
Well,
I know that's like
again, I can speculate. I'm telling you,
yeah.
this is back to the harness racing, idea. Like if you have the lead in like a harness race or a thoroughbred race, there's just no need to extend
Mhm.
yourself so much. You know what I mean? Where you actually try to slow it down a little bit, um, and as a result, you have these guys. Let's say Kyle Busch or somebody in like it's like in the 30 hole or something like that. They
Mhm.
have to start going blasting through the field. It's more they're more motivated.
Yeah.
To,
And like last week is an example like with Byron. Like we can all agree that Byron ran away with the race. He literally died. Like he was first basically the entire race, led 176 laps. He only had 59 fast laps, which
that's interesting.
you wouldn't think that when like the guy is out first all day for like 2.5 hours. He's the number one position and he only has 59 fast laps. So that's why I actually lean, and that's why I usually say, if people ask me how many DOMs do you want in your lineup, I say like four because I want to get those fast laps are almost more important to me
That's
than hitting the
interesting.
lap leader because they can rack up way more points. And if you're landing on guys who can get fast laps, you're most likely still landing on a leader at some point.
So from a driver perspective, like it says you drive cars or you at least how do you how do you get a fast lap? In other words, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Like, what does it look like? Someone that's like in the middle of the pack, getting if he's got to be passing people right for openers,
Mhm. I,
and
I think it's equivalent to like, a dog chasing an animal or whatever. Like if you have something to chase in front of you, you feel like I mean, I think naturally you push harder versus having a clean open racetrack in front of you. You don't necessarily have something to chase. You're just kind of maintaining whatever lead you have.
okay, okay. So then the other thing that I'm going to notice here is here's the way I think about things. So you have Kyle Larson. He's got the pole. He's all the reasons why he's a great play. Everybody doesn't need me to tell everybody that. But maybe the best car. I don't even know if it's the best car, but I trust everybody else. He's the best car. He's got the pole. He's just going to just. He's very very likely to lead the race for just an enormous amount of time and maybe win and probably win the race. Okay, but what if he doesn't, right? So like
Mhm.
that's so the first thing I kind of think of it back to the harness racing mentality is okay. So presumption number one is he just gets the lead and run away with it. If that was not going to happen, you know what I mean? He is not going to get the lead and run away with it. Who, even though the fast laps are more important than the laps led can add up if you have enough of them. Who's going to get around him? You know what I mean? Like it seems as though again that Hamlin just because he's the two maybe just gets a good start off or something like that. Um, but what about and I mean what I would do is try to find somebody near the front to kind of maybe challenge for that narrative. And
Mhm.
this is kind of annoying that I'm getting none of him just because I just like this dude. Maybe he just didn't qualify well, whatever it is. But Byron from the three, he's at
Mhm.
least close enough where he always seems like you said he ran away with last week, right? I mean, he's a young dude. He's got fast. Seems to always have a fast car. Um, maybe he'd be a guy that I would use either alongside. I'm just talking about guys that are outside of this
Mhm.
build. You know what I mean? And so talk about that a little bit with not even necessarily him, but like these other guys that maybe could take the lead because I want to have like alternate universes. Like there's two. Listen, we talked about this last week and it worked. There were two ways to play. You could either play lock it. We cost Logano. We were either going to play Larson, the other guy who's near the front, I forget who it was, in Reddick, right? You play all
Mhm.
three of those and then shuffle the rest. And that actually took it down. I got
Yeah.
the combination, but the guy who did it actually took that down. Or you could just change the narrative completely. So I think there are two ways to play. Either do what seems logical is Larson, Harvick, Almirola, something like that, right? Where there was somebody from the front, somebody from the middle, some place differential. But you don't like Almirola as much as maybe Zane Smith or maybe play both, whatever. Like one of these guys, and then just kind of shuffle the rest, or just change the narrative completely and say, okay, if I could just get someone else aside Larson to win the race, you know what I mean? Then I'm like so far ahead of the field that I don't have to be perfect anymore. You know, so I guess that's my question. Like, who's the guy that's gonna be there in that Hey, listen, I've seen Larson hit be stupid. You know what I mean? Like I've seen him hit the
Uh,
walls. I've seen cars run out of gas. I've seen stuff happen. Who would be your pivot then? I mean, like if you didn't think Larson was going to run away.
I let me answer this with what I think the public is going to do based on a lot
Yes.
of questions that I got this week, and I think people are going to directly, if they don't trust Larson, they're actually going to go to Joey Logano, which I don't agree with because and we've talked about the pivots before because that's a direct like salary pivot, and I think, and I said earlier, I think you should, if you're not playing Larson or you're trying to be underweight, Hamlin and Byron would be the two guys that I would probably smash if I was adamant on Larson not being the guy. And I think Hamlin and Byron can still work alongside Larson, especially with how many laps there are. And leaning back to, I don't know if Larson's going to get every fast lap as well, especially going in and out of traffic. But I guess Logano's being talked up as a pivot off of Larson, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I want to go Byron and Hamlin again.
Well, fortunately for me, I'm getting literally zero Logano anyway. So that's good news. But conceptually, what Brandon is talking about is something which I think is really important in all DFS. And when you have NASCAR with sort of limited decision points, it's even more important. So there are two things that I think are really, really good fades. Well, let's talk about the one we're talking about right now. So when there's a very obvious pivot, I think those are usually the easiest ones to fade, actually. And what I like to call it, this is more like in baseball, kind of like a pivot off of the pivot, okay? Because people are going to either, like I said, they'll go to Larson, try to get different elsewhere, or they're gonna say, okay, I don't feel like playing Larson at 70% ownership. Who's the natural pivot? I'm going to play that. I think the best way to if you really want cool leverage is to pivot off of that. You know what I mean? You find that secondary pivot, and I think that and listen, you talked about who that would be in this situation, but in the future, it's like just an important concept to kind of go up. And now, if Logano was showing up in my lineups, I would X him out and run like a build to show you what that would look like. But just for fun, okay, just for fun, I'm going to X out Larson, okay, and see. Now, there's two ways you can. I would love to show you the lineups I have without Larson in, but I don't have any. So let me just see what there are two ways to do this. First, what we could do is let's maximize our exposure to 50% and see what that would do. So if you did that, then you would end up with obviously more Harvick. You'd get more Bell and more Hamlin. Why is Christopher Bell continuing to just pop in like all these? I just am not sure.
I think it's so because I'm right there with Christopher. Let me see, because right now I have 14 lines. I'm gonna run 20. I have Bell in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
7 of those 14.
Okay.
And the reason being is first off, his pricing works in most types of builds. Even if you're, I'm going to answer this both using Larson and without Larson because I have him with Larson, obviously. His pricing is mispriced in my opinion, or underpriced based on his projection. Going on the same argument of, the leader not getting fast laps, we've seen Christopher Bell be able to just scrape off fast laps throughout races. Let me see if I can find the actual number real fast. But we're seeing Bell, in the fall race last year, he nearly had 6 points of fast laps. He had 2 in the spring in a race that he wrecked out in. When you go back and look at the races, we're seeing Christopher Bell usually get around like 4 to 5 fast lap points in general, and these are situations to where he wasn't necessarily starting right where he's starting here. That's usually a bit farther back in the field. He's shown phenomenal practice data, in my opinion, and I think he's going to maintain his running position inside the top 6 all day. So that's why I would back up that decision, or that at least what this is telling you to play Bell in, because that's what I'm doing. Between the guys up front as potential lap leaders, Hamlin, Byron, and Bell. Bell is my most owned guy up here between those guys.
Okay. So now the other way I want to play this is I want to X them out completely. Or now when I X them out completely, yeah, you know what? They don't really like that too much, but I don't care. We're gonna force ourselves to do it just to see what it would look like. And what this is, by the way, for those people who aren't uh, excuse me, that don't know what's going on here, is what you do when you build SaberSim. Like you say how many lineups you want to build. In other words, how many you want to play, and then what the pool size is. So what it does, it builds you say 500 lineups, and then chooses the top 50 for you. And the reason why is they give you like this 450 lineup, reserve pile, so that when you make these little changes, they have it to do whatever. And when I X'd out Larson, the reason why I got that error was they said that of the 500 lineups that they made for me, they couldn't find 50 without Larson in them. You know what I mean? So and that should tell you something, and depending on the sport, and this is like more SaberSim advice than anything else. My advice is that when SaberSim like starts yelling at you, you're really just kind of outside of your depth. In other words, you really just the changes you're making are probably way too egregious, and you should probably just kind of rethink about it. So this is no surprise. When you X Larson out completely, you're getting just more Harvick and Hamlin, Bell, Almirola, whatever. Okay. Let me try something different. So I want to go back to my sheets for a second, and I want to talk about this Almirola thing for a second, okay? Because something about a 32% Almirola just kind of, I don't want to say sits wrong with me, but if I'm gonna play lineups with Larson and Harvick, for example, I don't think I'm good enough to play 3 super chalks between Larson, Harvick, and Almirola and get the rest right. I'm not quite that good. So if I could somehow just get a pivot off of even Almirola, then maybe I don't have to be perfect elsewhere. And the guy that I identified as being lower owned, and I know you talked about him in your video, is I'm getting Zane Smith. Okay, he's 5,200. So what that does, well, first of all, you probably end up in lines with both of them anyway, Zane Smith and Almirola. But if you didn't, you can play Zane Smith. You get an ownership discount off of certainly a big ownership discount off of Almirola. And although it's not exactly the same price, they're at least, competing for the same types of points, So there's a little bit of leverage that way. And then I wonder what that would do. So let's try this. Let's go and this is exactly what I do every day. So we'll start over.
While you do this, I want to add that I like people watch. I don't tell Sheets anything before we do this. I just kind of show up and talk to him. He's getting to the exact same conclusions I am each time I do these videos with Zane Smith over like Eric Almirola. That's why I mentioned earlier when I was building lines, my lineups were not getting to Eric Almirola. It was getting to Zane Smith, just due to the builds that I was.
That's so funny. So this is what we're gonna do. We'll do it again. We'll go same thing. We'll do 50 because I made too many changes, and I have to just like slip over. As a matter of fact, it's always starting to yell at me a little bit. No, it's not. So if you literally X that Almirola, but for this build, what I want to do is at first I want to do 2 things. First I want to X that Almirola, see what I get, and then I want to lock in Zane Smith and see what I get, and see if there's a difference. I just have this weird feeling that when you do X that Almirola, you're going to get more Zane Smith, but we're gonna find that out in a second.
What I'm more curious about is what it does if it goes 3 drivers in the 8 and 9K range, or if it throws in another 10K guy. That's what I don't know, because my builds, because I look, I'm going 100% on Larson today. That's just where everything's saying play him. Every data point I would ever use says play him. I feel like I'd be a fool to, like, if I'm fading Larson today, it's because I think he wrecks, and I can never make that just choice of like, yeah, this guy's gonna wreck, I'm not gonna play him. So I'm 100% on Larson. The Zane part is because I'm using a lot of people like, as I said, Byron, Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, Martin Truex Jr., Harvick. So on my builds, I was not getting another like 10K driver. It was just Larson, and everything else is a balanced build.
What do you think people are going to do? Like I still think it's going to be Harvick, Larson, Almirola. I think that's what people are going to. That's what the ownership dictates, and that's what the bills dictate. And if they don't do that, like you said, it's going to be like Hamlin over Larson. So I think those are probably the ones I'm going to avoid. I'm probably going to, well, I'm not going to avoid them. In other words, if I play those three, though, if you play all three of those guys, Harvick, Almirola, Larson, I think you really have to get kooky in the other three spots.
I think another reason, maybe why it's not getting to another 10K, as I said, I'm not on Logano, but Kyle Busch, Blaney, and Chastain don't really project out well. So maybe, let's see. Yeah, so these are just balanced.
No. There's an issue because I still have Larson X now.
Oh, Larson X now.
So we have to figure out what's going on here. So let's apply Larson. We're going to start all over again. Sorry about this, guys.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I know, but don't like that. All right, let's start all over. That's okay. We'll start all over. We will upload. Okay. Boom. Make sure Larson's available, and he is. Okay. And we have no minimums, no maximums. We'll just build like this. Hang on. Same. The other guy that I looked at, I'll pull my sheets for a second, is the other kind of pivot off of Almirola I was thinking about I know who I want to get to. All right. So, and this is cheating sort of, but one of my processes is I get, again, like if somebody I respect, like Brandon, or someone brings up a guy, seriously, and this is the total process, brings up a guy they like and he's low owned, I just play him. You know what I mean? Like literally just like that. So, but usually good plays are just popular. That's kind of the way it is. But we're going to get to one that's not in a second. But let's just see what happens. So we'll X out Almirola just right here. Boom. X him out. And it does not get me that much more Zane Smith I would have already. What it does get me is more AJ Allmendinger. And it gets me more Chris Buescher. Now, again, I heard something out of the corner of my ear. You were talking about Chris Buescher as being something, either like you were saying he's like the same play as something else. You know what I mean? That was going to be really popular or something like that. So maybe you were talking about it with respect to Almirola. I'm not sure. But so when you X out Almirola, you're going to be getting more Buescher and you're going to be getting more Allmendinger. You're not going to get that much more Zane Smith, which is very very sort of interesting.
Yeah, I like Buescher more than AJ today. I think AJ will be more popular, and it's not because of the ownership. I feel like I always have to explain that to people who listen. I'm not fading. I don't like somebody purely based on ownership. I just like Chris Buescher more than AJ, and the fact that they start right next to each other leans it to me looking at projections more, and I think Chris Buescher does a better job today.
Okay, so here's one thing that I will literally just do this. So all the guys that we've spoken about so far, we've spoken about 11K guys, 9K guys, and 6K guys, right? Those are the guys that seem to be the big decision points, right? Do you play Larson? Do you play Harvick? Do you play Almirola? Do you play Hamlin instead? We talked about Christopher Bell. He's in the 8K range or whatever it is. We didn't really talk too much about any of these other ranges. So if we're not talking about, they're probably going to be somewhat low owned. But the guy who we was right in there at 8,200 is Bubba Wallace, okay? And I know you like him for a lot of reasons. And forget that. I mean, he's 15% owned, at least here. He's like the lowest owned of the higher rated guys, and he's in a range that nobody is fighting over, you know? So just for fun, what I like to do is what do lineups look like if I lock him in, or maybe if I whatchamacallit, I put a minimum exposure on him. Okay, so let's take a look and see what that looks like, for example. So I'm getting 14% of them, but you know what? I'm kind of not in the mood for that. That's pedestrian. What if I made 80? Okay. So if you make 80% Bubba Wallace, make it the highest owned guy, what are these types of lineups look like. Now, the cool thing is that if you do something like this, like I said, you don't need to be perfect. And not only that, but you can X out guys that you like hate. You know what I mean? Like, let's just say you say, listen, I don't want to go down with freaking my Bubba Wallace lineups because I blew combinations because I really needed to play Cody Ware. Like, for example, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's a good player or not. Right? Or I don't feel like Todd Gilliland today is going to be just no shot, or Ty Dillon is no shot, or Brian Priest, who you mentioned, has been struggling. You know what I mean? Like, guys like this are just like no shot. But if you do that, then you'll get. It's so interesting. You don't get 100% Kyle Larson anymore if you get 80% Wallace. I guess it just becomes harder to get Larson because most of the Larson builds you're probably going to end up pairing with the 6K guys, right? Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, you look here, the highest owned 6K guy, guy under 7K, only comes at 20% ownership, and it's actually Busher. It's not even Almirola. Mm-hmm. You know,
so this is basically the build that I would use, or the starting point. This is I think not necessarily what's on the screen on the right but this is my approach in this race.
And then what this is me. What I would do is I would also make sure that I wouldn't play. You say dominators. I say, but I let me tell you something. This is maybe like an NBA thing, but I love just playing mid-range guys, like in general. You know, it's like
8 to 7. Yeah,
and it's so funny because this is like this is the seminal point of all of lineup builds. And I asked Bobby when I first started. I said, Bobby, I have a question. What's better, playing a 10K guy with a 4K guy, or playing 2 7K guys? That's what I said, right? Mm. He said, "Well, that's a complicated question." I'm like, no, it depends on you know the answers. It depends on the slate, depends on this,
et cetera. Yeah.
But it's like, but it's a very legitimate question. You know, like if you have a guy that's going to hit a ceiling and a guy that's like a floor guy, you know, what's better? Is it better to play, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan at 8,000 each, or is it better to play, Jokic at whatever and XYZ scrub at 3K? You know what I mean? It just kind of depends, but I always love it, like in general, when people are playing like the stars and scrubs type approach to play middling, and like if I could get lines, for example, with like a Bowman and like a Bubba Wallace, like 2 guys in that range, mm-hmm. and then just kind of let her fly. You know what I mean? Like I think that you're different with respect to construction. In other words, like I'm not saying that either of those drivers are going to be particularly low owned, but I think playing them together, I don't know how many people are necessarily going to do that. So maybe you're not going to get different completely by your driver selection, but you could get different by the way you put them together. And that's mm-hmm. and that's honestly what DFS is. You know
and this is what I meant earlier when I ran stuff and made lineups yesterday. I just didn't get to Eric Almirola, not due to any specific fade. My lineups did not allow me to get to him because I just had guys projected better, either slightly more expensive or just slightly lower, and that's why I've ended up on so much Zane Smith. And
let me ask you this from like a confidence perspective when you're doing NASCAR, because for me it's I guess sometimes it depends on the sport. Like if you see that, for example, Almirola. Let's just say that you look at your ownership projections, you see Almirola is like 50% owned or whatever, projects to be 50% owned, and you run, say, 150 lineups, and you get 0 of them. Are you like saying, oh, fuck, or, oh, cool? You know what I mean?
So, and yet again, I mean, maybe I answer different because I have to make content. I mean, I clearly don't want to look like an idiot any given week, but I trust my projections. And if it tells me that Eric Almirola just isn't showing up in my stuff, I trust that. And so for me, it's not necessarily like my weekend starts and ends on my projections. Before I even build lines, if my projections are off, I've already lost the week. If they're somewhat arguable to what happens in real life, then we have a chance. So if my stuff is telling me not to play Eric Almirola, I don't necessarily argue that. I mean, at this point, as I said, I've highlighted him in my opinion here that I'm like, okay, I need to get some exposure to him because I had like no exposure yesterday when I did my first 14 lines. I need to get him in some lineups, but I'm perfectly fine rolling with what my stuff is telling me to do.
I'll give you guys that are listening kind of little bit of advice on absorbing content in general and replacing it with your own and all this stuff. So I'll use the NBA as an example. Like in the NBA, the content goes all day long. You know, you come up with a 12 o'clock look, and then a 5 o'clock look, and then 6:45 and 7. And I'm really well in tune with what the industry is doing literally all day long. Okay. And then if I build a set of lineups at 50 lineups at 6:45, and there's a guy that's raised to be 50% owned, that's like that I'm getting zero of, I'm like all kinds of suspicious, and it messes with my head, whatever it is. But then it's funny, like on the weekends where I don't really follow, there's not as much industry pumping up people all day long, whatever. I'll build my lineups on the weekends. I'll use my projections. I'll fire it up there, and I'll have like 40% of the guy that ends up like 4%, and I'm like totally chill with it. And I'll tell you, like of all the times that I've hit really big, it's always been in situations like that where I just do my thing, trust my projections, trust my approach, and listen, on a Monday afterwards, I'm like, Bobby, why was this guy like 40% owned? I couldn't get to any of them. He's like, oh, because of this, and it turns out it was some stupid reason why everybody was on him. That if I got entrenched with the industry, I would have done whatever. So what I would suggest everybody is listen, trust your sources, right? If you follow, you follow Brandon's projections, great. If you follow mine, great. Whatever you do, you know what I mean? Like put in the work. But then I would really have the confidence in it and just freaking just let her fly, So like for me, like it depends on the sport to answer that question. Like if it's NASCAR, really, like, and I fire it and I have 100% of a guy. This sometimes happens with a value guy. I'll end up like 85%, like JJ Yale or some stupid, you know what I mean? And that's like 6% owned. I'm like totally cool. You know what I mean? Maybe because I don't know as much, I feel that way. That's totally chill. I trust my projections or whatever it is. But other sports, I sometimes talk myself into other stuff. Anyway,
I want to jump in real quick. I mean, I'd look at this from a NASCAR perspective, but you can look at this at any sport. I'm looking just for the one race a year that I can hit the optimal or like be near it. This isn't like I'm not trying to cash each and every week as backwards as that sounds. I'm trying to win or at least give myself a chance at a top 3% line and letting luck take it from there. And so I'm perfectly fine missing some weeks. Like today on Eric Amarola, if he shows up and crushes, like I've just missed on him. My projections were wrong, but that's just, that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, and this is getting more DFS, general speak, but if you're playing GPPs, you really need to accept like lots and lots of days of just not cashing at all. And it's kind of weird to say it this way, but if you don't have that type of distribution, you're probably playing wrong. Like if you're cashing for, making like 1.2x on your money, like on a regular basis in GPPs, you're probably playing wrong. You're probably playing way too chalky and never leaving yourself that opportunity to hit the big one, which is the way results distributes, the way the prize pool distributes in GPPs. You just fortunately or unfortunately, you have to play for that top spot. Okay. Otherwise, you're just gonna grind yourself into submission. I'll listen. I've given this analogy before, and unfortunately, I have to now wax poetic about it. For those of you who don't know, I mean, I used to play poker. I used to back people in poker. I used to analyze poker. I used to teach poker and online poker and all this stuff. And I had, as hopefully a lot of you know, I had hundreds of people that used to play for me at various, not at the same time, but over the course of years and years and years. And I would say there's very few people that knows more about the way results distribute among players, like more than I do. And there were two distinct ways that online poker players that could play all this volume could go broke. Okay, it's one of them. All right, is when they're just super psycho aggressive, just throwing money into the trash can, just having no hope and going on tilt and losing their money that way. Okay, and that's obvious and painful in its own way. But the more painful way that people went broke is the exact opposite way. People that, and I had plenty of these people that played just way too tight, waited for good hands, and waited for great spots, and min cash, min cash, min cash, then up complain they lost a coin flip. Min cash, min cash, min cash. Oh, they playing, they didn't get it, they got it in good and lost. And over time, those people will go broke just as surely as the people that were hyper aggressive. It will just actually take longer, which may as well be worse. Okay. So if you're gonna play, listen, if you're gonna play DFS, you can play cash. You know what I mean? And play conservatively, and you make a pretty.
I mean, that's what it's there for.
Right, exactly.
Literally, yeah.
But in GPPs, if you play too tight, like if you play, listen, I'll tell you this: if you play enough lineups over the course of time, just to give an example, with Larson, Almirola, Harvick, I don't know, whoever the next two highest known guys are, you play enough of that over time, you will lose all your money. It just will. It just because the way the results distribute in GPPs makes that. That's not to wax too poetically, but that's kind of like the old Robert Frost poem. There are two ways that you could either die by fire or by ice. You know what I mean? And it was kind of an allegory, whatever. But the world can end either of two ways. Neither one is painful. Neither one is great, but it can happen in two different paths. Anyway. And now Eric just comes right on in like he doesn't know me, right? He's like, "Hey, bro, are you going all in on Harvick?" You know I'm not. You know that I'm not going all in on Harvick for openers, and I know that you know this. Each time that you ask me questions like this, like I think that, Eric, you're just trolling me. I know you for a long time now, and you know that I would never go all in on Harvick. Not that Harvick means anything to me, but this is exactly the type of guy I wouldn't. Listen, I shouldn't say I wouldn't go on him. I might go on in him if I were just in full, like maybe Larson fade mode, maybe. But I would almost rather. This is really disgusting, Eric, and I don't want this to come off as a recommendation. But I would rather take some stab on some Bubba Wallace type character or some. Maybe even a Chris Buescher, you know who we haven't talked about, like maybe even like a Martin Truex, or something.
Yes, I need to mention. So okay, so and you've heard me say this a lot. Anybody who's listened to me last year, in my opinion, was the exact same situation, same start. Bubba Wallace, Truex Jr., Hamlin were around the exact same price at these exact same tracks, coming in at the exact same, if not less, ownership. And was up there showing speed. Last week at Las Vegas, okay, it was the Byron and Larson show. You know who else was there running, from 4th to 9th all day? It was Hamlin, Truex, Bubba Wallace. They're not showing flashes, but they have been there. And I'm saying this with me, just where I'm at. You need to play Truex, Hamlin, and Bell every week until their prices come up. That's just my stance that I'm taking. So, again, I'm playing a lot of Bubba today. I'm playing a lot of Truex today. That's where I'm at.
What you can do, just for fun, you need to play Bell, Wallace, and Truex every week. And I will tell you this, that if I remember the names, I'm going to be such a freaking superstar. But there were 3 guys that you mentioned last year that you had to play every week. And I want to say one of them was Chastain, maybe, but it was Chastain. Was it with Truex also? There was like one.
Yeah, I mean, it was Truex, Hamlin, and another guy that I don't remember. But I know it was Truex and Hamlin because they came so close. They were going to win like 4 races, and every week they would wreck with at like the very end with no ownership.
Right. So if you want to play Saber Sim, like for example, if you want to screw around. And you like Brandon, you like anybody, you like a take, you say, boy, you know what? Every week I'll just throw in 30% Bubba Wallace, 30% Truex, 30% Bell, and just rock the house. What you could do is you put them in here like this, and then just see what we get, and and just and again, Saber Sim, you could just make these adjustments and kind of make that work. And what's kind of neat is that I don't think that, again, individually, these three might. I think Bubble House could take money, whatever it is. Bell's obviously going to take money just because of when I ran them, it was taking money. But maybe Truex again might be the he's not a play that people like to play all that much. You know, he's kind of like a guy that's been around the block, but not like, you know, I don't know. I kind of like this idea, and I'm going back to this idea of playing like multiple guys in the 8Ks. And I'll tell you what, the other guy that I like to play every week, and again, this is like a impossible spot, but it fits the 8K guy is my man Suarez. So like he's projecting for crap this week. It's kind of tough, right? I mean, like from the 11, you know, but if I'm playing like again, Larson, Almirola, Harvick, then I think it's time to
get
take
to
shots at something like that. So let me see what else I have here. Cody, I'm just looking at more of these back markers I don't think about. Because I'm looking at Almirola in the 31. I just want to see what else. Okay, Austin Dillon. All right, you can you could go up in price a little bit and go to Austin Dillon and he's okay, so he's projecting 5 points worse, but he's definitely more expensive. He's $600 more. So it's definitely a worse play than Almirola. Half the ownership. I don't know.
So this is a situation where I have Austin Dillon slightly over or projected over Eric Almirola. So while I didn't necessarily get to either of them a lot, when I ran the lines that got to this range, played Austin Dillon over Eric Almirola yesterday.
Well, you got like, you know, everybody over Almirola. So,
but you know what I mean. I got
right.
to more Austin Dillon than Eric Almirola.
Oh, you want to do
right
me a
now
favor? Can you tell me there was one fundamental thing I wanted to ask you about? I just heard out of my ear like 4 different. What's the deal with? I feel like Seinfeld. What's the deal? What's the deal with like the Ricky Stenhouse and is a pit crew thing or what? Is there something I need to know about as far as that goes or no?
I'm unaware of.
Oh no, forget it then. Okay, I heard some Stenhouse thing or something. Okay, there's nothing. Okay, there was some pit crew thing or something. Okay, there's nothing. And there's no late like penalties we know about yet. That'll be later, I guess. I suppose.
I mean, they'd be out right now. I don't believe so. I'll check it right now.
I was just checking. All right. So Eric Johnson. So you're getting a lot. So you're saying I'm getting a lot of Bowman. I'm getting a lot of Saber. I'm gonna be playing all in on Harvick, but then again, I'm probably fading Harvick. Yeah, Eric, man. One of these days, man, you're gonna cash for so big. I can't wait to have you on the stream. I just can't wait to have you on the stream. All right. I guess that's probably gonna do it. I'm gonna build my lives. Then I gotta run because I got practice. Not NASCAR practice. I got basketball. But again, Brandon, you can find his stuff on his Patreon. You can find it on YouTube. You can find him here. You can find him everywhere. And again, we're going to try to make this a thing where most Sunday. I don't think next Sunday I'm going to be available because I'm going to be away. I think, but we'll double check. But I guess that'll do it. Any last thoughts before you get out of here?
No, I can't think of anything. Just keep me updated on what you want to do next week. I mean, like I said, I love being here and then just talking lineups with you. I really enjoy it.
All right, guys. Thanks for everybody showing up. And somebody, let's take